So I want to
I'm going to Midwest UX next week.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I was going to go, but I just couldn't do it with engagements with clients. So
Yeah, Denise.
but I'm broadcasting.
Cool. And now your audio's on right now. And we're just going to keep it on. Okay. So we have ambient noises, and then let's get you plugged in, and then we'll go from there.
And then we're like, all right, here's the total for the ready to go.
Oh, I want to have the presenter view. Huh?
Yeah, we'll do that in a second. If you want to just get
So that leaves 3 of us.
Do you have audio or anything?
No.
What I am going to do is mute you. All right, but your microphone's on. You can see it down there. Screen 2, share. It's Keynote.
It's actually PowerPoint.
And you want it to be in present view.
Oh my gosh.
Josh, can you go over there and
Where's the microphone? Can I hear now?
Yeah, this is my last one. That's all I hear. Yeah. Nice. So I'm doing.
Grab some food. You want to munch on something at a time? Do you have a plug for your laptop?
Yeah.
Just for you dying on us. Sorry. What's up? How are you?
learn something?
Is it plugged in here?
That should be plugged in. And again, this is recording sound right now. So.
No, it's not.
Cool. Work.
What I can do and how
Because you get that weird echo.
You have to figure out how to a little bit of time and just sort of meet people, but you will. But you'll also like make it something that needs time. Sweet. We're gonna do something. That's yours. I'm excited. I remember talking to you. how long the guy is yeah, that's probably actually the one. Depends on more of the logic. I don't think they are. This one maybe. My last name so I'm not some of these letter combinations. Okay.
I love that now. Seats.
So,
You're up and out.
Yeah, so at 6:30 here, about 5 minutes, once a year. We will break. So the first talk is we have Chris. Yeah, that's right. Before that, Chris.
Like a week ago, Cat's got more. He's trying to redesign express outside.
Yeah.
Like, for a long time, but anyway, we're just actually like trying to see us this year. I'm actually
We're fresh and ready for that one. 2 weeks.
So, first time is about 10 years, and we do these grades. So we start off 10 years doing graphic design work. 2 owners from out of the community. So now the 10 health brands, some work, doing work with their express for a while. So now it's like more set. Design. So retailers are huge guys.
Did you already know? You already have a relationship, right? The become a team slightly different from store and I'm trying to those folks
That would be a big job. I mean, all of us.
We should be working together. But it's been so separate for so long. Trying to teams together.
So are you for Express?
Yes, in-house user experience.
Yeah, so I got you.
Yeah, 2 weeks pretty much.
I do all of the I'm still active. The issue is if you have like high energy level ones, and then you're smoking like kind of crazy. We're gone. You actually are moving to
No, I wish to get back there for you. I was trying to be nice.
I think working on
Make sure check everyone's up there.
Yeah, I think just
yeah.
we should have like a size.
Progressive French. Well, if I could share it with the jobs you did, I was account manager. That was a big thing about what they did. They said, yeah, you were here because you like it. And that was like 17 years ago. And
All right, we're gonna get started.
Yeah.
It's just the way. Just the way. Can you whistle?
No, I can't. Yeah, sure. Like the worst time of all time.
Who it's?
All right, we're gonna get started. Oh, that one worked. Wow. Yeah. Well, thanks for everyone for coming out. Do you want to do introduction? We're trying to make this as confusing as possible.
Yeah,
with,
I'm really confused.
yeah, with Columbus Web Group and IxDA and everyone talking. So
I'm Adam. This is Kevin. We're with Columbus Web Group. We're here with Jared and IxDA. We're going to do a talk tonight on user experience stuff. I think, is it your turn to do an introduction?
you can go. We'll make it really confusing. We didn't rehearse this.
So anyway, yeah, I'm Jared with IxDA. Thank you guys all for coming. It's really cool to see these two groups together. Normally, we often have our separate events, but we like to come together a few times a year and do these kind of big things together, so it's a lot of fun. IxDA, if you're not familiar, it's essentially for folks who are interested in user experience. If you're an interaction designer, mobile designer, developer, user experience designer, any number of other random job titles, or just have an interest in that kind of stuff, it's a pretty broad group, and you're always welcome out to other events. I think we have a couple we're going to go through, both some IxDA and some Columbus Web Group events. Should I start with breakfast and such as IxDA?
Yeah.
So one of the next things coming up that's IxDA is the UX Chat and Pancakes. So if you like pancakes and to hang out with people who talk about user experience, Friday, November 7th, that's 7:30, bright and early in the morning at TJ's in Beachwald. So that's up on the meetup site as well. So come and join us for that. And then I think Adam or
I'm actually going to go
to
to these.
a handful more.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of really great events coming up. One I want to call out is Arena Tech Night. So on all the tables, there's a little flyer. So it's actually next Tuesday, the 21st, starts at 5:30, and it's right across the street at Cardinal Solutions. It's $5 to get in. All the money goes to donation. It goes to charity. And also, if you buy a ticket, there's an auction or some kind of raffle that you can win. I think it works today. Yeah, there's a raffle that you can win a prize. So that's next Tuesday. Come to it, and details on the table. On November 5th, and this one's really, really exciting. So Erik, myself, Denise Philipson, and Ryan Stryker and I have been trying to organize a screening of UX Future Summit. So UX Future Summit, and that again is on November 5th. And we're going to be airing it at Moxie. So Moxie's going to be putting up the space for us to view the full day. And Cardinal Solutions is actually paying for the feed for that. And Pillar, Erik, myself, and Denise are donating money to food and drinks for it. So come out. It should be really, really fun. And we'll be posting about it probably on Meetup for IxDA and Columbus Web Group. And again, that's on the 5th, so probably have to take a day off of work for that. And that's, 10 a.m. from 5 p.m. And then the next Columbus Web Group is November 12th, and Dynamit, that's a digital marketing agency down the street, they're going to be talking about their design process, UX, development, and how they developed Donatos.com. So that's going to be a really, really awesome one, and we'll be posting details for that on Columbus Web Group. Columbus Web Group in December, we're kind of taking off time, and we're not going to be doing any presentations, so it's one of our rare months that we don't do one. So we usually do 1 or 2 a month. And we'll probably do a social, get people out, get drunk around the holidays. And then in January, we're actually going to probably be doing 2 presentations. Been reaching out to the people at Improving Enterprises over at Easton. So if anyone came from like the Easton area, we're going to start maybe doing some repeats of our previous meetups that we've done, and also some bigger joint stuff with IxDA out in the Easton area. So that's going to be on Angular and also MVStar frameworks. So that's it for the events. And I want to call out one thing. Jared is also kind of heading in, and he's becoming I don't know what the title is.
I don't know what the title is either.
He's the IxDA co-leader, Columbus guy, starting in January. So this is really his first meetup group that he's been organizing, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more with him. And then a huge thank you to Resource, who is letting us use the space and got all this ridiculous food and drinks. And Scott, do you want to say anything?
Oh, no, I'm Scott, work here at Resource, and I'm just, we're all psyched that these two groups were able to take it down. Please drink all the beer, because if you guys don't, then I have to put it away. So,
You'll take the pizza.
Yeah, I'm taking that home. Okay, so
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for showing up.
Yeah. Yep. And you want to talk the introduction on Chris?
Yeah. So first we're going to have Chris Hawkins. He's a consultant over at Cardinal Solutions Group in their UX and design practice. He works with 31 Gifts.
That's right.
All right. And his professional experience is design, development, user research, accessibility support, and education. Take it away. Did I miss anything?
Nope, that's everything. My entire life. Well, I'm honored to be in front of you guys. It's a pretty cool group, and happy to be the opener for Erik. He's a pretty awesome dude, so I'm glad you guys can make it out. Power to the User is the name of the talk. I sort of regretted it as soon as I chose it, but users are important. I think we have all spent a lot of time this past decade talking about users, but we can do it one more time. This day and age, I think that, obviously, we all understand the value of the user. We all, as in this group anyway, recognize what we need to be doing, but hopefully this will just kind of give you some additional angles to think about it, maybe take back to the businesses that you work with and help them understand it as well. So, without further ado, that's a book cover, Great Expectations. These days our users have bigger, better, greater expectations than ever before when it comes to our software, our websites, or our apps. I mean, it's pretty easy pretty easy to figure out why. We've got some stiff competition in terms of what's happening out there. You've got things like Facebook, where every bit of the content is completely tailored to them. Google certainly does quite a bit to feed exactly what the user's looking for and to change on the fly for that user. And in general, we've sort of transitioned in where just in general, users have so many options when it comes to anything, and like never before, their loyalty is at an all-time low. So high expectations, very low loyalty, right? And if you need an example, there's not really any better one than BlackBerry. I think that Apple obviously does a great job with their users, but they're sort of like visionaries, right? You don't ever really hear about them sort of asking people, what do you think we should build? Don't get the wrong impression. They're doing that sort of research, but they kind of like they know, and what they put out, we all adopt. And that's kind of true. Samsung's sort of the other side of the coin, where they do a really good job sort of surveying the market, surveying the users, seeing what's happening and reacting. But either way, those two companies are great examples of companies that have strong, loyal followings and do a good job of keeping their users engaged, whereas BlackBerry, went that's top to bottom. So, this is a play. We're kind of in this transition, or maybe we've completed this transition. Business hasn't quite figured it out yet, but it's the death of the salesman. We're out of this age of acquisition where companies like Zynga can just get more and more and more users to their product, and that's really all they need, is they just sort of overwhelm with new user base. And we're kind of into this new sort of age of retention, or it's all about the user now. So we have a lot of freemium products. We have a lot of sort of free, enticing offers to get users in, try out our product. You'll love it because we spent a lot of time making it exactly how you want it, how you need it, how it should be to empower you. And then hopefully they stick around. So it's never been more important to kind of have an actual decent product and, to fulfill your users' wishes. So how do we meet and or exceed our users' expectations and gain their loyalty? Well, be my player too. User engagement. I think the easiest and sort of probably the first thing that comes to your guys' head when you start to think about what you're building is how can I engage my user? How can I not just sort of offer them a website that they'll come to once and forget about it, but how can I get them to interact with my app or my website and come back on a regular basis? So let's go through just sort of some high-level kind of ways of engaging the user. The good, consumption, right? This is sort of a good example of consumption app where we've got push notifications for new content. So maybe if we're looking at like a news app or something like that, we can do more than just sort of have this thing that sits there. We can actually push them a notification that says, hey, a new article has come out, right? But it's not really anything beyond that. We're just asking them to consume this content. Still good, though. Better example would be a transactional app where now we've taken our push notifications to sort of the next level, and maybe we're saying, here's all the different types of news that we want to bring you all the time, but we're going to introduce some sort of transaction between us and you. We're going to ask you to sort of customize what we're giving you, right? And then the best example would be is actually called engagement. And this is where maybe we have, this is just one example, of course, but we have maybe push notifications for like a situational content. So Foursquare example here, you drive past something that's on your list of places to visit. Could be like a website that you go to, and when it recognizes that you're on mobile, it gives you more mobile-friendly content that sort of takes into consideration the other things it knows about you. But it uses all of the sort of powers that we have to really engage these people. Think of like this new line of like health apps that have come out and stuff. They really do a great job of introducing gamification into someone's sort of personal life and using the device that's with them all the time to kind of keep them interacting with the app. So engagement, and then also support. Unfortunately, if you build it, they will come is not always true. And that works for Apple, but not everybody else. Probably not any of us. So we have to support our apps, and we have to think about supporting our apps from the beginning, from the design, the development, the planning. Throughout that whole process, we have to be cognizant of this idea that our users are not necessarily what we are, what we hope them to be, and yet we're still creating something for them. So, you know, just from the get-go, if you can be thinking about ways to support the product while you're building it, I think you're much better positioned to engage them and keep them. So a good example of way to support would be maybe more than your traditional, you know, here's a phone number to call for support, or here's a contact form to reach out and get some support. Here's a better method. This is a user voice. This is actually their old contact form. But what it does is it sort of offers them an easy tool that they're used to in a contact form, but it takes it a step further and says, as you're typing, we're going to instantly search for knowledge-based articles, for feedback that we've got from other users. We're going to recommend those to you as you're typing, because self-service is sort of the idea here, right? You probably don't actually want to send us a message and then wait for a reply. As awesome as it is that we can all go out on Twitter and, you know, tweet to the companies that we interact with and get responses back. It's only 1% of people that actually want to receive support through Twitter. Why would I want to put it out there to everybody that I need help doing something, that I'm kind of slow in this regard? right? But it's also just against our nature these days to sort of sit on hold or to wait for a response. So this is a great solution, or I'm sorry, good solution. Even better, Google has a really neat way of sort of doing the same thing that was in that previous example of as you search, they'll give you help articles that already exist. But then they take it a step further and they say once it's posted, or if you don't find your answer, go ahead and post your question, but instead of it coming directly to us, it's actually going to go to our help forum where other users, because there's plenty of them out there that are good, powerful Gmail users that can help you. And there's moderators on here too, and sometimes perusing these types of forums are kind of funny from our standpoint, some of the problems that people have. But in terms of the immediate sort of feedback that they get, it's really nice because they can get the answers that they need, but they also sort of don't feel alone, right? And then the best, and I mean this is just an example, it's all you know, relative to what you're building and what you need as well, but again, thinking about this as you build. But tours, walkthroughs, inline help, things that actually, you know, if the user needs it, takes them sort of on a trip through your app or through your website, whatever it might be. Think of every time you download a new app from one of these, you know, great companies, what do you see? There's like a 3 or 4 page tour of what's new, of what you can expect in there, and no matter how great you are on whatever device you're on or on whatever software you're on, this is really helpful. It just gives you sort of a frame of mind to go in with, or sort of a base to start. You know, if the Gmail app on my phone updates, it's nice just to know what's new about it. Why did it update? If there's a new feature, how do I use it? Where is it? So this is really a great way to kind of engage your user, take them through what they're to do, sort of hold their hand, and of course this isn't forced upon them. This is sort of triggered if they want it, and it's integrated with the other options. So again, all of these things need to be used together and just be cognitive of them while you're building your apps. So, I was measuring something. Distance between me and you. So we've got our users engaged, we've got our users supported, and now we need to try to predict how we can build for this engagement, right? And a lot of it has to do with some of the analytics. And I'm just going to kind of breeze through this because analytics is sort of boring anyway, and you know, slides not really any better. But we think of analytics, maybe in this room we think of it more than just sort of old Google Analytics. I certainly do. I kind of get deep into some of this stuff. I really like Heap. If you guys are familiar with that product, it's sort of it sort of installs the same way as Google Analytics, but the difference with Heap is that it's sort of as soon as you have it installed, it's kind of recording everything that's happening. So you don't have to go in ahead of time and tag what you want to measure. It's measuring it all the time. And you can go in after the fact, and somebody with no programming skills whatsoever can say, I want to know when a user clicks on this button and then goes to this page and then does this action, and how many times does that happen compared to all my users that month. It's a really neat tool. So, but that's descriptive, right? It's users do this and or that. And then sort of the next step of that, the better if you will, is figuring out the relationship between this and that. Why do users that do this also do that? What is it that this has to do with that? A great example for this that comes to mind always is like Amazon, right? They actually take it to that next step where now that we understand the relationship between this and that, we can actually get prescriptive about it. We can suggest this to users that do that. If you bought this, we understand the relationship between this thing and that thing, so you'll probably also like that. No? Okay, well, how about this, right? So analytics in general, I mean, gives us a sort of an idea of where we're at, also helps us kind of predict where we want to go. Feedback. Obviously, this talk's called Power to the User. It's also a little bit about the power that we can get from the user, the power of the user's voice, the feedback that we get from them. instead of snooping around doing all these analytics, you know, it's kind of like if you have a store and customers come in and you kind of like hiding behind the coat rack and watching what they do and following them when they leave, and you can kind of figure out all these little details about them. Or you could just say, hi, what are you here for? Okay, do you like what you see? Really? Why not? Okay, so the user voice, I cannot stress this enough. It's simply the greatest thing to just be able to have a conversation with somebody that's using what you're building, whether it's beforehand, in the middle, or afterwards. Obviously, if you talk to them beforehand, you might skip over a lot of mishaps, but even if you can talk to them afterwards, there's no real failure that comes out of this because you get that immediate feedback from them. But you got to listen. We have too many scenarios, at least that I've seen, where you have these VOC, the voice of the customer emails that where I'm at currently, they get sent out every week, and it's sort of this collection of feedback that comes into the support team, and oh, that's sort of like a user comment that I can't really help them with, but it's some good feedback, so we'll put that in the VOC, the voice of the customer, and then it gets emailed out to like 34 people or something, and I don't think anybody reads it but me, and I don't even know why I read it. I'm just interested, and it's always like the same kind of stuff, but literally nothing happens with this email. Every now and then, like, it gets brought up in a random meeting if somebody needs something that they saw in the latest one that they happen to read. But again, we have to be listening, but we have to have a way of sort of measuring this feedback that we get, right? So the example of, or in the topic of feedbacks, a good institution is just a standard feedback form, or a survey, or a poll, or something that's sort of on your site, where you can send your users to ask them, hey, what are you here for? What can we do? How can we do it better? All that kind of good stuff. You get some great qualitative feedback, right? Some good stuff. But we're still in the category of that VOC, of that voice of the customer, and it's kind of hard to act on, especially for a big business, because usually the people asking these questions are so far separated from the designers and the developers actually working on the product. So a better method would be sort of a quantitative feedback. This is user voice again. This is Windows Azure portal. At Yahoo is using user voice. There's a lot of bigger companies starting to use this, but this kind of has the idea of, again, remember the form where they could start typing a question that they had for support, and maybe it offered them an article out of their knowledge base, or showed them other ideas that users have posted, because maybe the problem is hey, I need to know how to do this thing, and I start typing it, and it says, oh, you can't even do that thing. It doesn't exist. It's not a feature yet, but somebody has suggested it as an idea for us to put into our next release or whatever. So then I know I can vote on it, I can comment on it, and what's great for business is that this is quantitative now, right? What they have to say, qualitative. But because they can vote, because we can combine these ideas, because we can look at it and say, hey, 50% of our users who have taken the time to give us feedback want this idea brought to fruition. They want this feature in our app. It really takes sort of the concept of the VOC to the next level, because it gives business, gives anybody that's looking at that sort of an actionable way of getting things done. Because, like I said, you've got, in this case, 300. In the case of 31, where I'm at right now, within like the first 2 hours of putting user voice in, we had like 200 ideas in there. After a week, we had like thousands of votes for this feature that the development team was already working on. So it was great for them to sort of have that, to sort of get that immediate feedback that, hey, what you're doing matters, what you're doing counts. And in the case of them, unfortunately, I can't talk about any of their stuff because it all got delayed. So in their case, they had to really fight for this one feature that they thought their users would want. They talked to users, but business in general was like, no, it'll never happen, never happen. #1 item in the user feedback forum within the app within the first week, and now it has been pushed down, I'll say it, by more prints for boys and men on their bags. So unfortunately. Anyway. And then, of course, that guy, if you can get him, is the best. There's no substitute for, being able to just talk to your user and actually have that human interaction to do a user or to do a focus group or an interview or user study where you can actually see them interacting with your software or your app. I don't actually know what the heck's going on here. This guy's getting like brain mapped as he uses some sort of product. I've never done anything that crazy, but the things that come out of user studies are incredible, and if you can do them, in the early stages, if you come up with an MVP for your app and sort of get that one feature going and then get your users in there and using it and testing it, there's no substitute for that. So again, power to the user, but more importantly, power from the user. Like a giant battery that you can take and throw at business and say, shut up, they told us what they want. Here it is. So, how does it usually work, though? Unfortunately, we've probably all been through this process where you've been hired to create something and you start thinking about the ways that you're going to design it or you're going to develop it, and business says, well, hold on. We have been doing our homework. We have been out there in social media. We have been watching our competitors' reviews, maybe our earlier releases of these apps. We sort of know what's going on. We don't sort of know what's going on. We know what they want. We're passionate about business, but we know what our users want, and this is what they need. As designers, maybe that's not you, but as designers, you're passionate about design. So the first thing designers start to think about is what's the latest, greatest design method? What's the coolest thing that I can do? What's the best, how cool can I make this thing look? How can I make it interact in a new way that I haven't done before? A lot of times, you have to really fight back on that. It's like wanting to do something new that you haven't done before, incorporating that into the app. Developers, sort of the same thing, right? They're passionate about development. This guy is not really passionate about anything, but they think of it from a development standpoint. They think, what can I do that's sort of new, great, cutting edge from the development standpoint? We don't necessarily think at this stage of our user. We have our orders from the business. They say they know what the user wants. We're thinking, well, that's kind of stupid because it's not very cutting edge, but okay. Meanwhile, our users are, who knows? They're passionate about selfies, right? This guy is probably your best case scenario. He's actually taking a selfie, doing something pretty awesome, but still, that's his passion. Might not even have anything to do with the app that you're building or the starting point that business is coming at this from. So it sort of is a problem because we're in this box, we're in this silo, we're sort of developing and designing this thing. Nobody can see it until it's done. We have no user input. We're not thinking about it or talking about it outside of our little teams. And then it goes live, comes out of the box, marketing takes over. I'm not sure what's happening there, but we monitor what happens with the app. We try to gauge how much our users are interacting with it, whether or not it's a huge success or a failure. And unfortunately, too often, business freaks out because they realize not enough people are using it, or we're not able to correct this by getting enough new users in. They're still in that acquisition model, so Rome burns. Rome did not burn. FYI. What we should be doing, right? What should we be doing? You guys already know this. It's a simple concept. Just sort of talked about it. But start with the user. It's the most simple thing. If I was going to build something for you, I'd probably ask you what you want, how you plan to use it, what you're going to do with it. A great example, Fashion Metric, I think is the name of the company. They had this great idea for an app where people that had trouble picking out what clothes they wanted while they were shopping You know, they would have an app that sort of helped them connect with designers or other people that would help them sort of pull the trigger on a purchase while they're in the mall. And fortunately, before they started developing, they went to a bunch of different malls across the country, and they started talking to people, surveying them, and they just asked very open-ended questions like, you know, what's the one thing that keeps you from buying something at the store, or what's the one trouble that you encounter while you're out at the mall? And nobody, not a single person, said that the problem that they had was that they just, you know, weren't sure if this was a good purchase for them, or if it was fashionable enough or whatever. So they're like, okay, we were wrong. Good thing we didn't build that. So they kind of started over, and they looked at the feedback that they did get, and they started to you know, kind of add that up and figured out a new sort of base feature that they could come out with and start from there. Probably saved lots and lots of money, right? Business would have been happy. Another, I guess, you know, example, if we go back to BlackBerry, it's like they're very smart at BlackBerry. It's not like they didn't have enough smart people working on the products, but they didn't really ever look out and see what was going on and what other people were doing and what users were starting to adopt and what was becoming popular, and soon enough, they were gone. They're not gone, but pretty much. So if we start with user feedback, if we get buy-in at the beginning, it's also a great way to sort of get that, to get them engaged before there's even something for them to use, right? They can sort of be following it. They can kind of build a loyalty before we even have something for them to use. And then we can design, develop, and be thinking of support, obviously, from the beginning, and come out with a minimum viable product, an MVP. If there's a way that we can talk business into saying, let's focus in on one thing that we know they want and do it really well and support it really well, and then build from there. That's the way you build engagement, the way you build loyalty. If you do that, you'll be successful. But it's key, I think, to in order for this to work, you have to be sort of positive. You have to be in the frame of mind that your product will be successful if you have the user interaction and user feedback and user buy-in and all of that kind of stuff from the beginning. Sometimes you're going to hear things that you don't like as a designer or as a developer or even as business. But if you can sort of quantify those things and figure out what makes sense, what the users are asking for in mass quantity and not have your feelings hurt, that's the key. So here's some tools. These are basically all community or feedback type tools. User voice, I recommend checking out. Intercom, I would highly recommend checking out. The other four, Answer Dash is pretty cool. That's something new I just came across. It's kind of like a cross between taking someone on a tour through your software and integrating in some of the other inline help tools and stuff. So Answer Dash is pretty awesome if you're looking for some support options. And then I mentioned Heap when it comes to analytics. I haven't seen anything else that integrates an app and a web and can do what Heap does. So definitely check that out. Again, just wrapping up at the key takeaways. Think in terms of keeping our users happy, not acquiring new users. That's dead. Try to hold on to what you got, and if you do, more will come. If you build it, they will come. If you're satisfying the ones that are there. Start with the user when possible. I know this doesn't always make sense, but feedback is never a bad thing to get at any point in the development cycle. If you can get it in the beginning, then you can save business a lot of money. And if you can find a way to convince them of that, good luck. Start with an MVP when possible and your minimum viable product. Build support into your app. Be mindful of support from the beginning. No matter how intuitive your product is, people will need support. A lot of people think, oh, that Apple just comes out with the stuff that never ever needs support and they never get feedback or anything, but that's not true. If you go to Apple's website or into their store, they're all about support. They're all about feedback. It's actually one of their biggest things. If you can quantify your feedback for focus, that's invaluable. You know, being able to take the VOC and put it into something that's actionable, and you can build with predictive and prescriptive analytics in mind as well. You know, especially from a development standpoint, if you can keep in mind that you might want to be doing these things from the beginning, obviously you're going to save yourself some trouble later. And just in general, be mindful of all these things. Be positive, be successful, because ultimately it's you guys that have to convince business of all this. Nobody here is a director of whatever at some, you know, you're probably not a sales director or any of those titles that sort of think they are the ones that's going to dictate what happens in the app, right? But you're going to interact with all of them. You're going to talk to all of them. So be positive about it. It's the only way to convince them that that it's the right way. Get behind the quantitative feedback as soon as you can, because that's really convincing to them. It's really an eye-opener. And then as much of that analytics that you can pull into it. They need numbers to be convinced. You got to have a smile, but you got to have numbers too. That's it.
So, yeah, so we're going to take a 10-minute break just so people get some more drinks, more food, and get use the restroom.
If you need to use the restrooms, they're down the hallway to the left behind the big TV there. There's 2 restrooms and a shower. Please don't pee in the shower.
You guys have a shower?
We just have a photo set.
I have a question. What users need is very important. References as well. And of course, it's true.
Good idea.
Cheers.
And if you want to go immediately into screen sharing your secondary screen. Just this one. Screen 2. Then your mic's on, right? Can you just talk for a second? Yeah, can you hear me? That's good. I'll be back here. Okay. Oh, people just need paper. They could use the.
Wow. How long what area of town?
Oh, I'm right over here, so I'll be dry.
Oh, thank you very much. I saw two of these backs. It works straight through my life. Okay. Hey, buddy. What's that? Let's work our way back to our seats. Erik's going to join us here in just a minute. So grab that last beer and steal your neighbor's beer while we're not Is everyone out in the hall? Everyone's in the hall. Everyone has lights this way. I don't see any normal controls for lights. I think Mac is control. It's okay. I think people are settling in here. So give me 1 second. Make some more noise. I'm going to try to get the dark model. I know, right? I can't listen through the crowd.
Mr. Ryder probably better off
Sending a text message. I should tweet that we're ready to start, right? Yeah, my mistake. All right, so everybody made their last rounds there by the beer. Please make sure you drink it all before you leave. Unless you're driving, don't do that. Grab a piece of pizza, make your way back to your seat, and we will introduce Erik here in just a second. So our next speaker this evening is Erik Dahl. He's an independent designer here in Columbus. He's been around Columbus for about 5 years now. About 5 years, something like that.
He's practically native. He founded the Midwest UX Conference, which is actually taking place next week in Indianapolis. If you don't have your tickets yet, grab them quick. Come on out and see me and Erik at Midwest UX next week. He's also on the global board of IxDA. Erik is a thoughtful designer and also a bit of a geek. Be sure to ask him about his Arduino experiments. Finally, I think it's really my pleasure to introduce Erik because he's been sort of a mentor to me in my UX career path. So without further ado, Erik.
All right, so this is a talk that I sort of have been giving up around the last year and a half and sort of been evolving. It started when I was running a software design studio a couple years ago, and it was a way for me to sort of pull all my thoughts together about what have I learned over the last 10 or 15 years of doing software design. So this is a shortened version of all the axioms. It started at like 150. And that sort of narrowed down to about 50 the first time I gave this presentation. And then I think the website has about 26 on, and we'll cover maybe half of those today. So Erik Dahl, it's EA Dahl on Twitter. If you want to tweet at me with any questions or comments, you can use the hashtag UXAxioms. And like you said, I'm an independent designer. I ran a software design studio until February. And now I'm independent. I've been running the local IxDA for the last 5 years, which is the Interaction Design Association, which is a global organization in countries all over the world. And there's one here, chapter here, and you can get involved with, there's a Facebook group, which is really helpful if you're on Facebook. A lot of people are sort of asking questions and posting stuff, sort of impromptu meetups. I also founded the Midwest UX Conference, which is in Indy next week, and I think there's still like 50 tickets left if you want to go to that. It's a nice sort of regional conference, relatively low cost compared to national conferences, but we bring in national level speakers. All right, so let's get into it. I consider myself an interaction designer primarily, but we sort of play in this world of user experience. And whenever I talk to clients, I always sort of ask them, like, well, what do you mean by user experience? What does that mean to you? And I talked to a potential client this morning, and I think he had a really good definition of what it is. I've talked to other people that just think user experience is just UI, or it's just you know, the interface or something like that. And if you talk to 100 people, right, you're probably going to get 100 different answers for what is user experience. And so I just sort of want to start here and talk a little bit about this to let you know where I'm coming from. And I think, you know, this is Dan Saffer's diagram. Sort of, it's all these different disciplines, right, that sort of come together. That is user experience design, or you see Jesse James Garrett's sort of classic layer definition of all these sort of different layers make up what user experience is, or what contributes to the overall user experience. But for me, and the way I've been thinking about it a lot, is user experience isn't like a thing or a discipline that we do, but it's really a way of thinking about something. It's a way of sort of being in the world and thinking about how what we make impacts people, how it impacts business, how it impacts the world in general. And just being mindful as you move through the design and development process of what you're doing. And then also, what's the strategic plan of how we're going to actually sort of implement this and how we're going to go through this process. So I think we have like 10 or so axioms that I want to cover today that sort of is going to address these things. And these are the things that I think of when I think of user experience and how to do it well. So the first thing, axiom number one, is that it's all about people, it's not about the object. And this is a thing that I still see with designers today, right? Fetishizing these objects that we make and just getting so excited about this new shiny thing and then buying it from another company, or getting so excited about the thing that they're making, and sort of losing sight of why they're making the thing that they're making and why it really matters. And to sort of drive this point home, I want to show a video from one of my mentors, Joe Ballet, who was one of the founders of Maya Design in Pittsburgh, where I worked for about 5 years before I came to Columbus. And this is a video that we put together several years ago, sort of describing our way of thinking of how we think about design. Keep the volume.
Our role as designers in this thing should not be to have this object be an end in itself. You know, the happiness isn't going to come from engaging in this piece of software. You know, if by using this product or by owning this product, coming in contact with this product, you see it as a window through which you engage more meaningfully with life, then I think we've done the right thing. But you notice where that puts the emphasis. The emphasis is on the product. The product becomes like a whole that you want.
So that last line, right, it's in its transparency that it fulfills its function. For me, this is the core. When I think about user experience, it's the core of what drives the stuff that I do. And that doesn't mean that the product is invisible, right? The product is still there. The product still has an impact, but it's not the point. It's just a means to an end. It's a means to improving people's lives. And I think a lot of people say, you know, the product should be invisible. And I don't think that's exactly right, right? It still has a place, but it's about the emphasis of where we put our effort and our focus. It's not on the product, right? It's about the way we're impacting people's lives. All right, the second one, focus on the experience and not on the function. And I passed out some Post-its. You can use the arena night flyers. We're going to do just a quick little sketching exercise. If you have a pen or pencil, you get this out. It won't take like 15 seconds. So if you don't have a Post-it, you can grab one or pass them down. Grab a pen and pencil.
Oh, thank you so much.
If you don't have a pen and pencil or a piece of paper, you can sort of do it in your head, right? These aren't complicated sketches. Is everyone ready? All right. So I just want to take like 20 seconds, and on the paper, and if you don't have paper in your mind, I want you to design a vase. Right? Does everyone know what a vase is? There's a picture, an example here if you don't know what one is. But just to design a vase. No right or wrong answer. This is an exercise that I picked up from one of my other mentors in Pittsburgh, Mark Reddick, who is an amazing designer, does a lot of service design now. But I thought this was a really good way to sort of explain the differences between sort of focusing on function versus experience. All right, does everyone have their vase? 5 more seconds. All right, just hold them up. You can hold up your picture. Someone want to sort of describe your vase, something if you're really proud of it, and sort of shout it out. What it looks like. They're hard to see, they're kind of small. Water, all right. So most people drew something like this, some sort of vessel, right, that contains water and flowers. Different shapes, right, different contours. Okay, and that's pretty common, right? That's what most people do. So the next thing I want you to do, I want you to take another 20 seconds, and this time I want you to design a better way for people to enjoy flowers in their home. It can be anything, right? But think about people enjoying flowers in their home. Right. 5 more seconds, you got to finish it up. All right. Now, if you just drew another vessel, raise your sort of Post-it note. And it's not a wrong answer. All right. Now, if you drew something other than just a vessel, hold up your Post-it note or. All right. So, can someone shout out sort of what it is? These are sometimes a little more complicated. Someone shout out and explain what their drawing is.
Indoor flower box.
An indoor flower box. Okay. How does that work? So like a flower box on the outside, but on the inside. Okay, anyone else? What's that? Rug made of flowers. Great. Anyone else? Floor to ceiling window. A what? A cat?
Yeah.
Nice. Perfect. So these are all like wildly divergent ideas, right? And the idea here is that when we start thinking about experiences, right, and you could take this one step further and abstract it out and say, how do you design a way for people to connect with nature, not just flowers? And you get even broader set of things. But the idea here is that when we start thinking about experiences, not about functions, we start opening up our minds and opening up the idea to new things. And we start thinking more in systems instead of objects. So I think this is key when we try to understand user experiences, thinking about systems and ecosystems and not thinking about objects. All right, so the third one, stories are how we understand and shape the world. So there's 2 parts to this, right? It's taking in stories to understand the world around us, but it's also crafting stories, and that's how we create the world that we sort of, as designers and as developers, that we're making. So when I think of stories, I often think of culture because my background in technology is as a cultural anthropologist. So for me, Clifford Geertz is someone I come back to a lot. He was an anthropologist. And he says that culture is simply the ensemble of stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So you might say, well, why is this important? Stuart Brand had this idea, this concept of pace layering, which, is anyone familiar with the concept of pace layering? All right, most people aren't. A couple people. The basic idea, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but the basic idea here is that you have things at the very sort of core of this graph, like nature and culture. And as you move out to things like commerce and fashion, as you move out in the circle, things move faster. They're at a faster pace, right? And so the part of what this comes in is as these circles move at different paces, there becomes friction between these different layers. And I don't really want to get into that today. What I want to sort of take away is that culture is at the beginning of this. It's sort of at the center of these pace layerings, and it changes very slowly. So the idea that stories are part of culture is that these stories that we tell that shape our world don't change that often. They're sort of fundamental to who we are. And sort of bring this home, I want to play a short video from a Southern playwright, Harry Crews. There's a great documentary about Southern culture called Searching for a Wrong-Eyed Jesus, which I highly recommend if you're interested in documentaries and Southern culture. But he has just a short clip about stories.
The truth of the matter was, stories were everything, and everything was stories. Everybody told stories. It was a way of saying who they were in the world, with their understanding of themselves. It was letting themselves know how they believed the world worked, the right way and the way that was not so right.
So there's a lot here, but what I want you to take away is this idea that stories are how we say who we are in the world. It's our understandings of who we are, right, of ourselves. And it's our understanding of not just ourselves, but how this bigger world works, and how it all fits together. And so for me, this idea of understanding the stories that people tell, that helps us understand, like, how are they going to interpret the products that we make? And how do the products that we make fit into their lives? Do they force people to create new stories, or do they fit seamlessly into the stories they're already telling? And that's going to help us understand, like, how is adoption going to happen with the products that we're making? Do we have to design in things that are going to change the stories that they're telling? So we need to think about sort of these bigger ecosystems and these bigger things that are happening around stories and storytelling as we understand the world and we create new stories of our own. All right, so the next one, problem finding before problem solving. So sort of two classics here. Albert Einstein, give him an hour to solve a problem. He's going to spend 55 minutes of that sort of determining the proper questions, and then actually just 5 minutes, right? A very small proportion actually solving the problem. Similarly, Abraham Lincoln, right? 8 hours to cut down a tree, 6 hours going to sharpen his axe and be preparing. Again, smaller proportion of time actually executing the activity that he was assigned to do. So we see a theme here, right? So I want to highlight a sort of passage from Daniel Book's recent book. I can't really call it new anymore. Has anyone read this? Highly recommend it. I have recommended any of Daniel Pink's books. They're very accessible, but very good. A lot of his previous one, Drive, is about motivation and what motivates people. This is sort of about motivation as well. There's a lot in it. We're not going to talk about all these things. I just want to talk about one of them, which is this idea of problem finding. So if everyone would just take a minute and see this little blurry. I'm just kidding. I'll tell you what it says. So basically, in the 1960s, there was a study done by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote Flow. If anyone's familiar with that book, again, highly recommend that. But he's a social scientist, so he was at the University of Chicago. They ran a study with like 30 art students, and the assignment for the art students was to come in and draw a still life. So all they had to do, 30 students that came in. So they had two tables. So they had a table of like 30 or 40 objects. Students would come in and grab their objects, take it over to the other table, set it down, and draw the still life. And what they found was that there were two behavior patterns that emerged from these students in how they did this process of drawing a still life. The first one, like I just said, picked up the object, brought it down, and put it on the table and executed a still life. And he called those people problem solvers, right? There was a second group of students that did it a little differently. They sort of circled the table, they pick up the object, examine the object, sort of see what they were going on, maybe compare objects together, and finally they decide what objects they wanted to use for their still life. They bring it over the table, they set it down, maybe they rearrange it again, maybe rearrange it a third time, and then they would execute their drawing. And Csikszentmihalyi called these people problem finders. And the big difference between these two groups of students, they still did the still life in the end, but the problem solvers were asking the question, how do I do good work? How do I execute it, right? How do I just build this thing? But the problem finders were asking a different question first, and I think this is what's important. They're asking, what is good work? What is a good still life? And so when I think about user experience design, this is what we need to think about, not just how do we make something and make a good thing, but how do we make sure it's the right thing that we need to build? And that's where user experience comes in, is sort of doing that problem finding, right? Understanding what are the good questions to ask. And I think when we do this problem finding, it allows us to reframe the problem and set up new solutions, just like the exercise that we did at the beginning, where you call it a vase or you call it people enjoying flowers in the home. We reframe the problem and allow us to come up with new solutions. And the reason that is important is this concept of global versus local maxima. Does anyone familiar with this concept? The basic idea is that if you're on this hill here, right, and you're just optimizing your product, you're going to go up here and you're going to get better. It's going to be a better product. But it's not as good as it could be if you step back and you reframed what was going on and you solve a different problem. You solve a more complex problem or just one that actually meets your user needs better. It might not be radically different, but if you allow yourself to step back, examine the situation, solve the right problem, and then do all the execution, do all the optimization, you can get to the global maxima instead of just the local maxima. All right, the next one. Know your materiality. And for me, I think in user experience, we're talking people, technology, business, aesthetics, all these other things, right? Lots of stuff that people need to know. And it's not just wireframes, it's not just user research, it's not just sort of UI design and interface design, it's all these other things. There's sort of a lot of talk in the design world about kind of the unicorn designer that can code and other stuff. And for me, I think that that's just, again, it's a misframing of the problem. I don't like to think of it this way because I don't think there's one right answer. But to me, it's this idea of having a literacy of materiality and having curiosity. And I think if you have those two things, then you can do anything, right? And I think why that's so important is because user experience is this sort of synthesis of all these different fields, of all these different things. And because it's sort of involved with technology, it's constantly changing, right? The ground that you're walking on is constantly changing under you, and you have to learn a new technology, and you have to learn a new thing, implementation method, or a new research method, or a new tool comes out, and you have to figure out a new way or a new process to do that. So I think the goal isn't to become expert in those tools or processes or technologies, right? But it's to maintain a materiality or a literacy in all of these things, right? And for me, again, it's not just the tech, it's not just people, but it's also business, understanding business and how business works. And you might have to teach yourself that, right? So that's a lot of things to learn, right? So it reminds me of Bucky Fuller's concept of this comprehensive designer, right? Who in his mind was an artist, an inventor, a mechanic, an objective economist, and an evolutionary strategist. Holy shit. Like if I had to do all of that stuff, like no one can do that. Like that's an aspirational goal. Like only a small handful of us in the history can be experts in all of these things. Yeah, let's strive for that. Let's go to that place, but let's not evaluate ourselves against that sort of expertise because I think very few of us are going to actually achieve that. So how do we actually do that, right? So it brings me to this quote from Richard Saul Wurman about Charles Eames. And he said, you sell your expertise and you have a limited repertoire, right? Because if you sell your ignorance, you have an unlimited repertoire. You can only be expert in so many things. But if you can be ignorant about like just about everything else, right? I'm ignorant about so many things in the world, and if I use that as my marketing ploy and my marketing strategy, that I'm going to sell my ignorance and I'm going to sell my ability to learn and master something and figure it out, then I can do anything. I don't have to just be limited by the expertise that I already have, right? I'm not just designing something that I've already done in the past, but I'm designing the future now. I'm engaging with clients about designing the future. So for me, it's not about being experts, but it's about being experimenters. Be willing, be curious about the world around you. Be willing to experiment and fail, and admit when you don't know something. I had a job this spring that they wanted me to do a Windows 8 app. I'd never designed a Windows 8 app. I'd seen them, but I told them up front. I was like, look, I've never done this before, but I know how to figure it out, and this is my plan for what I'm going to do. And they're like, great, thanks for the idea. Sounds like we can do this. And we ended up working together, and it was okay. But it's because I sold my idea of ignorance. Right? I sold this idea of like I have a plan to figure it out because I've been here before. I've been in a position where I don't know what's going on, but you figure things out. All right, the next one: create models, not just narratives, and use other people's frameworks and create your own. So we talked about stories, right? And stories evolve into narratives, but it's not just enough to have those narratives or stories. We have to model those things. And it's really not, again, if we don't objectify the object, it's not about the model itself, but it's about that process of modeling. It's about going through that thought process of creating these models that I think is really even more important than the models themselves. And I want to show you just an example. This is some work that I did like 8 years ago. I don't know how long. For Target.com, this is like in the early days of e-commerce when they didn't really know anything about how do people actually shop online. And so we did a bunch of interviews with customers and watched them shop online in different stores and sort of understood their shopping strategies. And what this is this is a model explaining like 5 different sort of user archetypes and their shopping process and what they thought was important and where they're going to spend time. If they had 30 minutes to shop, where they're going to spend time in these different stages of the shopping process and where are they actually making the buying decision. And you can see here, like, some people are making the buying decision at the end. This researcher is making a buying decision way early, right? Just when he's doing research, before he goes to actually the store to buy it, he's already decided that he's going to buy it, right? People behave very differently. So we created this model, and by doing this, we can layer lots of different stories on top of itself, and we can communicate that to the customer. But just thinking through this helped us understand what's the sort of ecosystem of online shopping at that time and how people actually make decisions. There's no audio here. This is another project that I worked on a couple years ago when I was at Lexington here in town. This is a sort of mid-level prototype. It's not the final product of a precision farming system, right? So a system that drives the tractor itself down the field, controls all the implements going outside the back of the tractor. But before we got to creating and designing the interface, we talked to a bunch of users all over the world and tried to understand what do they think about precision farming and what do they think about the future of farming. And through that process, we created this model, which tries to simplify what are they thinking and how do they think about precision farming and how do they think about just their farm in general. And what this does, again, like it's relatively useless if you don't go through the process of actually creating it, but it gave us criteria on which we could evaluate then the prototypes that we were making based on the feedback that we got initially from end users, right? So we create the models, sort of work through the process, and then gives us feedback or criteria that we can use as sort of to check our prototypes as we build them. I want to talk a little bit about using other frameworks to evaluate products. Does anyone know what a Fitbit is, right? So I didn't have anything to do with the Fitbit 1 design. For those of you who don't know, it's sort of a pedometer on steroids. It counts your steps, but it also can track your sleep. And I use one a while. I have a different one now. I've gone through several of them, as a lot of us probably have. But I always had a problem with this one. I was really interested in my sleep. And so what would happen is I would go to bed after my wife went to bed typically. So I'd come into a sort of pitch black room, and I'd take the Fitbit off, and I'd put it in the little armband, and I'd go get ready for bed, and then I'd like hit this button. There's a button right here. I hit that button to put it into sleep mode, so I could track my sleep. and this bright blue light would come on in this pitch black room and start counting down the time I was going to sleep for like 8 hours, hopefully on a good day, 5 hours typically. But it would count it down in tenths of a second, right? And so I was like, this is just, it's not right. This is broken. But I couldn't explain exactly like why it's broken, right? But I knew, right? A lot of times we know things are broken or we know things aren't right, but we don't always have the language to explain what's going on. Until I started doing some work when I was at running the software design studio. I had an employee, a designer, Scott Sullivan, who's out working at Adaptive Path in San Francisco now, and we did some workshops on Laban movement analysis, and because he had done a lot of work with dance when he was in high school, and he told me about this stuff, and I was like, that's amazing. Like, let's do this. And so we actually ran a couple workshops through IxDA around Laban movement. And the basic idea is that it's a framework for understanding human movement. It has really not a lot on the surface to do with the practice that we do every day, but it does if we dig into it just a little bit. And so it has these three sort of vectors, right, of weight, space, and time. Things can either be heavier or strong or heavier or light. Space, you can move directly through space, or you can move sort of indirectly. In time, you can be very sudden, or you can be sort of sustained in terms of a temporal movement. So if we take these three vectors and we map my experience of the Fitbit 1 on these, we see that it was strong, we see it was direct, and it was sudden, right? This sort of blue light coming up in the pitch black room. And so according to Laban, that sort of combination of these vectors is punching. So what the Fitbit was doing was punching me 10 times a second as I was trying to go to sleep. They're like, this is just not right, right? But now, using this framework, I have a language where I can start to explain why this is broken. And I think what's interesting about the frameworks, too, is they start to give you levers. Because now I can start to not only explain what the world was like, but I can move some of these levers and say, well, what if we change the strong to light? What if we change the sudden, right? Tenths of a second? I don't need that. Pull it down to sustained, right? It's just sort of, I know it's counting, but I don't need to know like how fast it's counting. And if we do that, we get what Laban called gliding, right? And a gliding movement is something that's much more closely associated to what I want to be doing when I'm trying to go to sleep. So frameworks like this, Laban movement analysis, not meant for designers, but gives us a language that we can accept, that we can sort of take and appropriate and start to interpret the products that exist in the world, or use it to make design decisions as we're making our own products. And I think this is just as applicable to sort of web products, not just physical products. All right, the next one, reframe constraints as forcing functions. So I did some projects on wearable computers for the military, again, like 6 or 7 years ago. This was before sort of like a lot of the wearable stuff that we're doing with now, even before like touchscreens and sort of iPhones and all that. But what you can see up here, this keyboard, this virtual keyboard, they had essentially an occluded display that came down from their helmet, an 8600 display, and they had to use this little device. They would sort of move with their thumb to sort of move a mouse pointer around to select keys while they're under gunfire, right? Like it's pretty ridiculous when you think about it. So we came in to sort of like just do some work on this project and see if we could help improve it, right? Like sort of last and Band-Aid kind of work, right? Nothing up front. We tested in the lab just to get a baseline. We're getting like 3 to 4 words a minute in lab conditions. So we had an idea, like, okay, well, what's this input device? Hardware we can't change. We can't touch it. What's it good at and what's it bad at? Well, it's really bad at fine-grained mouse movement. We see people come around and like circle around the key and then like finally hone in on it, right? Because trying to do that. But what's that input device really good at? Well, it's really good at directional movement. Well, why don't we take advantage of that? So we made a circular keyboard that all you had to do was push in a direction. It didn't matter how far, or how hard, or how long you pushed in that direction. You just push in that direction, and it would select the key that was associated with that degree. And we put it like 2 layers, so they optimized for letter frequency. So 80% of the time you're on the outside layer, so it gives you enough of a sort of range. But we didn't really optimize this. I mean, just like prototyped it, threw it in the lab, like 15 words a minute. Like just by switching this and taking advantage of the constraints. And we didn't optimize it. We could have done better. There's probably better solutions than this one. But but playing with those constraints and taking those as forcing functions and say, what can I do with these constraints? Because if anyone's done client work or in-house work, right, there's tons of constraints. You can't ever get rid of them. So just like open yourself up, say, I welcome you, I'm going to take you on, and you're going to be my best friend now, and we're going to figure this out. Constraints, I think, as a designer, constraints are your best friend and sort of open up new doors to do things you would have never thought of before. All right, complexity, don't simplify it. So complexity in the world is just like a representational graph, not real numbers. But the cost of complexity is rapidly reducing, right? It's pennies, if not fractions of pennies, to produce sort of these microcontrollers and all these things that go into computers to sort of make complexity rampant. And at the same time, because of that, right, we have this massive increase in complexity and the amount of information that's in the world. But the problem with this is that we as humans, we're not evolving that quickly, right? Our ability to take on and understand complexity is pretty flatline, right? I don't have any superpowers that my grandparents or great-grandparents didn't have biologically to sort of understand complexity. Well, so that's kind of a bummer, right? There's all this complexity in the world, but like we can't do anything about it. So that, from my standpoint, that's our job, and that's our opportunity as designers to sort of fill that gap between the amount of information, the amount of complexity in the world, and how people understand it, right? You should get excited about this thing, this challenge that's in front of you. So how do we do that, right? So when I think about that, I think about the law of conservation of complexity. So we can't get rid of complexity. It exists in the world, but it's got to go somewhere. You can't just blow it up. So we can either punt on it and make our end users deal with it, and they have to sort of wade through all that complexity, or we as designers and developers sort of take that on and say, we're going to figure out how to sort of hide some of this complexity that the end users don't have to do. And the reason why this is important and why we don't want to just get rid of things and make them stupid simple is because power comes from complexity, right? The space shuttle, the Apollo landing, right, was a massively complex thing, or it had, yeah, so it was like hard to use, but massive power, right? A hammer, dead simple to use, but you can only do so many things with a hammer, right? You can hammer nails, you can sort of break things up. So for me, this idea of taming complexity is how can we sort of keep the complexity but not make them complicated? And I think there's a subtle difference between dealing with complexity and dealing with things that are complicated. All right, make stuff and then kill it. This is some work that we did down at Tiger Tree. It was just a sort of side project. We installed a bunch of sensors in Tiger Tree, which is a store, a retail store in the short north, just to understand sort of human movement. And we needed to understand how people come in and out of the store so we could understand store density. So we, of course, like rolled our own computer vision system because it was fun. And so this is Scott debugging it. But it ended up not working for reasons we wouldn't have known other than building it and actually putting it in the world and seeing why it broke, because it sort of choked the Wi-Fi, they couldn't play Pandora anymore, and like a list of other things of why this solution didn't work. But we had to actually build it to know that it wasn't going to work. And it didn't take that long to do. So the point here is, like, sometimes you just have to stop thinking and start making, but always make in the framework of being reflective about what it is you're making and know when you have to throw it away. Sort of killed us to have to throw this away because we really liked it. We thought it was a nice solution. But it didn't work, so get rid of it. The next one, should I go forward? All right, understand and play with emotion. When we talk about user experience design, emotion is always a topic that comes up. Like everyone else, we think about it as well. This is a rough sketch that we did on a project where we had the client yell at us, and we had to figure some stuff out because we just sort of took some stuff for granted, and then there was this whole political thing I won't go into. We can talk about it later if you're interested. It's sort of a funny story. But we had to say, okay, what is it that we're actually doing here? How can we explain it in a framework that people will get and he'll sort of trust us, because it was a new guy come in as VP and whatever. So this is just a really simple process. It doesn't really matter what it is. But we did a couple things, right? So we used BJ Fogg's behavior change framework, right? So motivation, ability, and triggers, and then we added like a reward aspect to it as well. And then on the x-axis is just sort of the major touch points in this process. Again, not really important. And then the top, we're sort of like mapping the kind of ebbs and flows of emotional states. And we were like, okay, well, when is emotion high? Because we couldn't redesign all of it. We couldn't spend the time we wanted to. So we had to pick, like, where are we going to focus our design effort, and what are we going to do in this short period of time we had. So it said, okay, where are the emotional highs? And we want to make sure that we hit those highs. And then based on where those emotional highs are, like, where do we have, what levers can we affect change on, right? Here, like, the ability, we couldn't optimize the ability of this one, but we could sort of play with the motivation, and we could play with the actual trigger that was happening. And so we had this conversation, we used this framework and this sort of idea of where the emotional peaks are to scope in the work that we had to do and focus our efforts and make those decisions of where we're going to spend the time with the client. And so this was really helpful for us to sort of turn that project around and end up doing a couple more projects with this client after that. So that's it for today. There's a lot more at uxaxioms.com. There's another presentation up there. There's the longer presentation, all 26 sort of axioms spelled out with some descriptions. There's comments there if you want to comment. I'd love comments. Continue the conversation. But that's it for today, so thank you.
Hey, thanks everybody for coming. Thank you especially to Erik and Chris for joining us this week. One quick announcement, there's a startup weekend opportunity coming up. Jay was going to tell us about that real quick, and that'll be it for today.
Hey guys, yeah, sorry to make this even longer on you, but excited to be here. That was an awesome presentation. Erik, wherever you went. Coming up next month, we have a startup weekend event. Has anyone here been to a startup weekend? A couple of you? Cool. So Startup Weekend is a global organization, but we do an event here locally 2 or 3 times a year. It's a 54-hour event from Friday night through Sunday. We're bringing in about 100 to 120 individuals, designers, developers, and general business-minded folks. On Friday night, everyone has 60 seconds to pitch an idea. Then teams, everybody votes on those ideas. Teams are formed around the ideas. And then you work through the weekend sort of building that product, validating the idea, customer discovery, prototyping, user interface design. So,
and then it all culminates on Sunday with pitches to product entrepreneurs, product design experts, and developers and architects.
Yeah. So we'd love to have you guys out there. It's, like I said, it's a community event, open to pretty much anyone in the community. We'll be here a little bit longer. I have cards if you want to get more information.
And we have questions about that. Questions?
November 14th to the 16th. So we have tickets are on sale now. The early birds tickets are still on sale through Friday. So you get to get them early. But like I said, I'll be here. I have cards. If you want my contact information, it's columbus.up.co.
Really, you should Google it. Columbus Startup Weekend. You can contact us too. Let us know if you guys
It's all weekend weekend.
So it's Friday. We start around 5:30, 6 o'clock. We feed you throughout the entire weekend. If you have an idea or you want to just come and join an idea, this is our Friday night to form teams. Saturday it's 9 until however late you want to stay. Some teams stay until midnight. Some head out around 10. And then Sunday is again 9 or whenever people get there until presentations happen at 5 o'clock. So it's a little bit of a hackathon combined with actual product install.
Thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Last thing I want to call out, if anyone's interested, trying to get some people to go to Three-Legged Mare and get some drinks. I'm always trying to push people to get more drinks, so try to eat some more pizza if there's any left over, and hopefully you join us at Three-Legged Mare and be partying. Thanks.
Have a good day.